We're very fortunate to have with us an outstanding person, Joe Thomas. Joe was a social studies teacher in Mesa, correct me, Joe, if I'm wrong, and he taught US government. He has been the Arizona Education Association president since 2016, right, Joe?
Yes.
And we're going to be through next July. So he has a lot of information to share with us about the last 6 years and what's going on in education. So I'll turn it over to Joe.
All right. And thank you for the opportunity to have a conversation with Green Valley Democrats. I have driven by and through Green Valley a few times on some of my treks across Arizona. And I grew up in a very small town, not in Arizona, but in Oklahoma. And so I probably smaller than what Green Valley is. Temple, Oklahoma, I grew up in, had about 1,000 people total in it. I was in a class of about roughly 15. I moved in 7th grade to live closer to my grandparents, a town called Nenakaw, Oklahoma, which means red water running, I believe in the Choctaw language. And I had a class of 50, so it was 3 times what I was used to having, but still very small, very rural. We weren't big enough to have football. We played fall baseball with a few other teams in the state. Sorry, I got a message on the screen. I attended Oklahoma State University, graduated and moved out to Arizona in 1996. I was lucky enough to bring a bride with me, just crazy enough to make the move. She finished university out here and became a teacher as well. I started in alternative schools, an alternative school called Mesa Vista in the Mesa Public School District back in '96. And we worked with students that were referred out of the traditional high schools for being in gangs, for cussing out teachers, for getting into fights, for using drugs. They were students that found trouble and trouble found them. But it was a great opportunity. They were reluctant and resistant learners, but once you worked on relationships, you could break through some of that and really help them get back on track. And I worked in that school for about 10 years and loved it. I now serve as president of the Arizona Education Association. I was vice president for 6 years before that, and I'm finishing up my last year now. And I get to work with reluctant and resistant legislators now, and quite frankly, a similar governor that don't always see the investment in people the way we do at AEA. We believe that stable communities and healthy communities are all people really need to excel. And if we can do our part towards providing great public schools in every zip code in the state, to where regardless of where you live, you get to go to a fully staffed school where students have access to all the core subjects and the electives, the courses that you really, really want to take, is to make sure that we have a full component of career and technical education courses, and to make sure that college and university is truly affordable for the students that want to go there. We've got to do right by our communities to keep up this kind of bond that the public school has with the parents in the community of safeguarding your students for the day and helping them get a little smarter, a little more competitive, a little more cooperative. AEA is 20,000 members across the state. We focus a lot on leadership development and trying to build up structures that are similar to what the political parties have, where you have local structures and statewide structures and the national structure. The Arizona Education Association is a state affiliate of the National Education Association, the largest union in the nation with 3 million members. It won't mean anything to anybody on the call, I don't think, but I serve as the president of the National Council of State Education Associations. And so I'm kind of the president of the presidents, but that's of a group of state affiliates that try to work with NEA in the same way that the state parties might try to work with the national party on focus and party platform and different things. And in Arizona, we have a lot of work. So I want to spend a few minutes talking about that and then hear from you all on what questions you all might have for what opportunities are in front of us. We have historically, for at least the last 20 to 30 years, been a state that does not invest a lot in their students. When you compare us nationally to the other states, we always fall in the bottom five, somewhere 46th through 50th. That's changed a little bit in the last, I'd say, decade. When I was vice president, you all may remember Proposition 123, which was a tough proposition, quite honestly. It diverted some of the state trust lands profit off of investment into our schools, into primary student funding, whereas we were taking a little bit of money from it and putting it into our schools, but we were really trying to build the trust up and have it build up even more and more to where we could do something even bigger with it in the future. But that got about $300 million into our schools, and it helped because we had educators, not just teachers, but educators that weren't getting raises, and they were quitting and they were moving to other states and other professions. We also, in 2018, when I became president, 2016, we had a lot of ideas of things we wanted to do, and then Red for Ed began to sweep across the nation. And what I saw in Arizona were educators that were looking at the time, at West Virginia, a state that has probably a better known union history than Arizona's union history. I mean, we have a long union history in Arizona, but it's just, it's unique, as are all the states. But the teachers and the educators in West Virginia were speaking to their legislature and speaking to their governor in a way that not many Arizona educators had really seen. They were doing a statewide action. It was a strike. They had the ability to do that. And I kind of put the question out to our members, like, are you all watching what's happening in West Virginia? Are we going to do something similar? And I wasn't thinking a strike. I wasn't thinking a walkout. I wasn't thinking anything like that. But do we want to feel powerful as a union and as educators? And do we want to stand with our communities to see if we can speak in a different way? And it was amazing. And it would not have been possible what happened in 2018 in Arizona, the Red for Ed movement, if the community had not stepped into the space with educators. And so if you all participated in any way, shape, or form from 2018 with Red for Ed, or the Invest in Ed initiative that we put on the ballot that year before the Supreme Court kicked us off, or the Invest in Ed ballot that we put on in 2020, which we passed. Thank you all very much that voted for it. We're tied up in the courts with that now. But what I've seen in just that little bit I've talked about are educators believing in themselves, not believing that they can teach or they can do the job they were hired to do in school. They always believe that. That's human, right? That's confidence. But the belief in solidarity, the belief that if you take a stand, the person next to you is going to take that stand too, because you've had a conversation, you've talked about it, and you've realized it's time to do something beyond the emails. It's time to do something beyond the phone calls. It's time to do something beyond the outreach. Everything we've been doing by the rules is right, but they're not listening. And when they ignore us, we know they ignore our students. And you don't get to do that. Parents expect not a good kindergarten teacher. They expect the best kindergarten teacher to be working with their student. They expect the best teacher of United States government. I would not say that was me. I tried as hard as I could to make class engaging, but they expect that schools are going to be ready for their students and move them forward. And we have amazing work that's going on in our schools, but we also have a shortage of people that are willing to teach in Arizona schools because of the class size, the workload, and salary. Even though we've made some strides in that recently, we still have a huge deficit, and it's harder out in the rural areas than it is in some of the urban areas and suburban areas to fill those positions. We have a bus driver shortage. We have a health assistant and a nurse and an instructional assistant shortage. And COVID has made all of this more difficult to navigate because we don't want our schools to end up being places where kids come. Some of them have access to the vaccine and some don't, and exchange that vaccine and then take it home to their families, causing further destabilization of the community. So we have been working to fulfill our mission, which is keeping the promise of quality public education. We worked on that every year we've been in existence. And I think that in the last almost decade that we've really turned a corner. Again, it gets back into this idea of belief, and that educators know that if they take a stand, if they tell their story, and if we can talk to people like you that support public schools, and we can tell a story and reveal what we're seeing every day, and we can look for solutions. One of those solutions might be, if it comes to it again, another statewide action where we show a strong show of support for our public schools, our students, and the people that work in them. Because again, kind of like Main Street, kind of like our religious community, our schools, our nonprofits, those are the cornerstones of our communities. And in different communities, different ones of those are more important than other ones. But I can't imagine a community without a public school in it. It boggles my mind to that there are people that don't want to give our students the best. So that's a lot of what we do. 1 minute on what's going on right now. We just referred, we're part of an effort, the Invest in Arizona effort that just referred the massive tax cuts to millionaires that the governor and legislative Republicans passed at the end of the session. It's called a flat tax, but really it's not much of a tax cut for me or you. But if you're making millions and millions, it's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax cuts. We also referred an attack on Invest in Ed that creates a kind of a tax dodge or a loophole for millionaires to avoid paying their fair share of the new Invest in Ed tax. AEA is part of 5 lawsuits right now. One of them is a capital funding lawsuit that has been around since I've been president. Our state has not been funding our capital needs, building renewal. One of the reasons our schools don't have good ventilation to be combating the virus right now is because the ventilation hasn't been upkept or hasn't had good upkeep for years and years and years. So we're fighting that one. We won our initial lawsuit against the mask mandate, against the vaccine mandate, and against the prohibition on the mask mandate, the vaccine mandate, and the teaching of truth in our schools. The governor is appealing that one to the Supreme Court, so we'll see where we end up on that. But they passed a lot of laws this last year on the last night, and so even taking a step further away from transparency, they shoved 200 pages of policy into the education budget at the last day that they were down at the Capitol, and then passed that through. It's absolutely unconstitutional in Arizona. Laws or bills that go through the process can really only be about one subject. The subject has to be listed in the title, and they did a lot of horse trading and log rolling. I hadn't heard the term log rolling in quite some time, but they really acted bad, and that's saying a lot for this legislature on the last day. And so we were able to win that lawsuit as well. There's I could talk about 1,000 other things, and I'm happy to, but I want to pause here because I've been talking a lot, and hear if there are any specific things that you all want to hear about or speak to me about or tell me that I can take back to AEA, because this really is a wonderful opportunity to talk with you all.
Okay, George, I know you had a couple questions.
Question I'm interested in was on the referendums, and I want to pat Green Valley Democrats on the back. We had 384 people turned out a couple weeks ago for our petition palooza to sign some of these. So we were trying to do our part, Joe. On the Invest in Ed, the 3, what will they look like? They will be on the ballot, as I understand it. What will they look like? Will the wordage change? Will the cap tax and the flat tax and the small business tax? I'm assuming they will be an individual item on the ballot. What will they look like, Joe?
From what I understand, and first off, Petition Palooza is the coolest thing I've heard of in a long, long time. So great job on pulling that off and coming up with a really cool name. And thank you for the work that you all did, both on that and on the voting rights issues. When a bill is referred, it's different than writing your own law. So Invest in Ed was an initiative, but when you refer, you have the 90 days before the bill comes to a law. If the signatures hold on either or both of the referrals, they will be on, the laws are stopped. So there'll be no flat tax, and there will be no Senate Bill 1783, which is the tax dodge for millionaires. Those will not go into effect. Invest in Ed will go into effect. That money will be collected and distributed to the schools. And in November of 2022, there will be a question, and we would be asking people to vote no. Just like when we referred, or when Save Our Schools referred vouchers, and it was no on Prop 305. Whatever numbers they get us, the question will be, shall you enact this tax plan? It'll be more, more specific wording than that, but shall we enact the flat tax? Shall we enact Senate Bill 1783? And we would be a no on both of those.
As Mike Norman has a question.
Go ahead and let Mike, and then I'll get back.
Go ahead, Mike.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for being here. Quick
Absolutely.
question. Why, maybe it's not so quick, but why do you feel the Republicans in this state are so hostile toward public education?
The $1 million question. I don't know. I've worked with Republicans in every school I've ever been in. We have a quarter of our members are Republicans. Republicans are not anti-union. There are some Republicans are, hell, there's some Democrats that are. But typically people who believe in workers' rights and again, believe in this idea of stability. How do we use our governments? How do we yoke our government at every level to just provide a little stability so we can have businesses, so we can have safety, so we can build an economy, so we can have great schools. But there are people that just don't want to spend any money on anything. And as long as we have some good schools in the state that they can point to and go, oh, well, look at this charter school in the suburb, or look at this school in Scottsdale or Paradise Valley or Mesa or wherever. If we have a few schools that are doing really well, they say, well, if they can do it, everyone should do it. And anybody that's ever spent more than 5 minutes in a classroom understands that all of our children have different needs. They come from different areas that have different values, that have different criteria for what they want their kids taught. Schooling should be community-based, but there is just this sense with some of the Republicans that are elected, and I know I've got a partisan group here, and I love you for it, but I don't know a good answer to that question, except for there is a strong privatization thread in the Republicans that get elected in Arizona. And that's why they like charter schools, because there aren't teacher contracts in charter schools. Everybody can be fired at a moment's notice in a charter school, unless the charter elicits to give teachers or principals or anybody contracts. They like that mode of having one person in charge. Well, I think we can open up a whole can of worms about January 6th, but they really like to have a very powerful person that gets to make all the calls. And they don't like when educators stand up and say, well, you know what, maybe we should look at minimum wage, because we know that's impacting our families, not just my family or another educator's family, but our students' families. And when we talk about college affordability, we talk about things that cost money, but again, it provides that stability for our communities to truly flourish. So all I can think of is they just don't like what we like, and so they take it out on us. But earlier I was asked before we started if I interact with any of the other state affiliate presidents, like the Utah Education Association president or the Texas State Teachers Association president. We talk all the time. We have meetings about every 2 weeks, and they're facing a lot of the same issues we are. Very few of them tell stories of true disrespect that the legislature shows educators, like what we see in Arizona. And I think in the last few years, part of it has been because we fought back. And we have educators right now that they feel like their backs are up against the wall. They feel like they have support from their parents. They'll do whatever they need to do for their students, but the workload is unbelievable right now. And the work environment is dangerous. And we have a governor that doesn't want to allow people to require masks, even for a short period of time, to get through a spike, that wants to spend money to get kids out of schools versus support the students where they are. It's just frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating.
It seems that it's just becoming entirely politicized. Also, isn't it just kind of the case that maybe this is a general statement, generalized, Republicans don't want to have anything to do with raising taxes, because maybe it's some kind of slippery slope. They think that if you raise taxes here, then you're going to raise them over there, right? Something. And so it's getting rid of the loopholes. Now, could you explain that flat tax a little bit more specifically? And then,
Sure.
There's a chat question I'll ask you.
Okay. A great place to get some information about all of these is there's a website. We have a website. The campaign had a website. It's investinaznow.com. And I think it'll give a little bit of a breakdown because I may miss pieces. But what the governor passed as a tax package was a series of cascading tax, well, not cascading, but a series of tax cuts that are far more beneficial to people on the high income, the people that have the most that they're earning and that could afford to give a little bit more than, you know, someone, a first-year teacher that's earning $40,000 a year. Their taxes are almost cut in half. And you go to the 40-year teacher, or excuse me, not the 40-year teacher, the first-year teacher that's making about $41,000, their tax cut, I don't know the percentage, but it's about $80, 80. No one's going to feel $80. If you ask me, Joe, we're going to build a new high school, or we're going to give you $100 back in your taxes this year, I would say build the high school. I'm not going to, I mean, I could use, who couldn't use more money? But I think that's a better investment in my community than you know, me going out to eat one more time with the family. I would rather my kids have a great high school. So what we end up with is a flat tax, to where the tax percentage is the same for everybody. So a first-year teacher pays, and I apologize, I forget the rate, but I think it's about 2.9 or 2.5% of their income in taxes, and a millionaire pays the same amount. And it's devastating. It takes $2 billion with a B, $2 billion out of our state revenue, out of the general fund. The general fund pays for K-12, it pays for universities. The general fund pays for transportation and highways, whether that's the paving of the roads or a highway patrolman to help a stranded motorist. They also pay for a lot of support in the county supervisors and through the county hospital system. And so all of the roads, all of our infrastructure is paid for out of the general fund, unless there's very targeted other incomes that come in. So this will be devastating for Arizona in the long run. Kansas tried it about a decade ago, and Kansas, it was when Governor Brownback was there. They did a flat tax. It tanked their entire economy. K-12 funding, university, everything went down because they weren't raising nearly enough money. They'd institute massive tax cuts over a few years. It got so bad that the Democrats and Republicans reinstated the old tax levels. And they did so at a 2/3 majority to override the veto of a governor. So think about that, because what was said a minute ago is true. The elected Republicans, I don't know what we'd ever have to do to get them to vote to raise taxes. I just don't think they would do it. It's one thing to get them to refer a tax increase out to the voters. We can sometimes get a few of them to do that, but they're so against taxes that they'll never raise them on their own. But in Kansas, it got so bad that the Democrats and Republicans together formed a supermajority to override the governor's veto. So if we don't stop this now, I promise you, in 3 or 4 years, it'll be so bad, we'll be out there stopping it then. I'm all for being preventative. Let's not go down the road Kansas has already shown us is a bad road to drive on.
Yeah, I think there was a book called What's the Matter with Kansas or something like that.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, here's a chat question from Nancy. My siblings grew up in Tempe in the 60s and 70s, and the school system was one of the best in the country. A profound change has happened in the interim, but I've never understood how it happened either. Do you have any comments or questions or thoughts about that?
Well, if we go back about 40 years, so just after the era she's talking about, I'm sure it held true then as well. But we were in the middle of the pack on funding. Again, ranking us isn't everything, but it at least shows relatively how you're spending, as compared to other states. We were in the high 30 or the low 30s. We're like 31st, 33rd every year. And for some of the years when we first started building our schools, we've spent as a percentage on our students, we were beating a lot of states. Now that's been 40 years. So what she's talking about is absolutely true, and it probably was known nationally, especially a town like Tempe or a town like Tucson or communities that are right next to colleges of education, where you can have really good investment and collaboration back and forth between the K-12 system and university professors and the students. in both K-12 and university. It just gets back to tax cuts. When you cut taxes, you have to cut everything, and we're a big piece of what gets funded.
Has there been any efforts at a sales tax increase to partially fund education?
We have a 6/10 of a sales tax that was passed back in 2000 with Proposition 301, which raises about $600 million a year that goes into our schools. Sales tax are supported by kind of the people that are in the middle, the people that are Democrats and Republicans, but aren't, hard left or hard right, because the idea is everybody pays. We have, and there is a fairness that's baked into that. We have one of the highest sales taxes in the nation already. And sales taxes are also seen by the progressive community as regressive, in that if you're a millionaire, you're still only probably going to pay so much in sales tax, because it's not what you're spending, it's what you're saving that makes you a millionaire. And they should be paying their fair share, as should we all, right? We all have to contribute because we get something out of this society. We looked at a sales tax, and when we were talking about Invest in Arizona, we looked at everything. We looked at property tax, which will never pass in this state. I think it was about 15. I think it was about 15% support, but we wanted to look at everything. The two that polled the highest at the time were a sales tax for about $1 billion, which would be almost a full penny additional, and the tax on high income earners, which also raised about $1 billion. So it could pass, but then you're fighting your far right and you're fighting your far left to get something like that through.
All right. I had one question. I know George has a couple other questions, but if you're in contact with other union member presidents and so forth in other states, the ones that are top ranked, now we're usually in the bottom 5, you said, right?
Yeah.
How about the top 5 people? How are they funding and how are they doing? What's different in them, in their situations?
Connecticut is one, and I've never really had a conversation with their president because they probably spend almost 3 times as much as we do. I think they're at about 11,000 per student, and we're closer to 4,000 per student. Another high income state, I believe Minnesota is one of the top 10. They fund, a lot of these states will fund through a property tax. One good thing about Arizona, or some of the good things about Arizona, is the way we fund our schools is very not equity based, but it's equally based, meaning that we do spread money around. We don't leave our rural communities completely out, to fend for themselves. There is good centralized funding, and there are other states that don't have that. They rely on property taxes inside the community to fund everything, with not a lot more money coming to it. The difficulty we have is, even though our system is written up well, we just don't put enough dollars to it. And part of, I think, what we find out in Arizona is there is such a mountain to climb when you're talking about a new tax. You have a lot of people that settled out here because we have low taxes. You have a lot of retirees that they've given their share. They've contributed. They're certainly willing to continue to contribute what they can, but they don't want new property taxes because they've just paid off their house, right? I can't wait to get there. I'm looking forward to that part of my life, and playing with grandkids. And we have a real independent streak in Arizona, which is good, because I think that's why we can pass a minimum wage hike. If we put the right argument out there, I think people think, yeah, people should, their work should be valued. We were able to pass Medicare for the poor because I think people do believe that even though you're independent, that has an impact on all of us. And so there should be some base level of that. We have the Independent Redistricting Commission, and we have clean elections. We put the right arguments out. People in the state value transparency, and they value an independence. I think they still value their neighborhood school district, but too many believe that we're wasting more dollars than what any system could waste. And that's why it's difficult to get new dollars in. Or they say, we want to see we want to see test scores go up before we give you more money. Well, that's like saying, I want to see you gain weight, but I'm not going to feed you anything, right? We're not going to help you be ready to have a lower class size to meet the needs of your students. We're not going to beef up the resources for special education. We're not going to make sure you have enough counselors and nurses, or enough money to have all the sports that your kids really want to engage in and keep them engaged. We're not going to do all of that. You do better, and then we might give you more money. And that's the mindset. It's not Democrats. There is a sharp partisan line when it comes to education funding. And if we had a majority of Democrats in either chamber, in either the state house or the state senate, the whole game would be changed. Because they would have to work together, and our schools wouldn't be as neglected. Our students wouldn't be as neglected as they are.
That's good. So George, I know you had another question or two.
Well, I wanted to ask on behalf of Mike Norman. Mike just asked a question a little bit ago. Mike is a substitute teacher, and we thank him for doing that. Even at that age, Mike, thank you. Is there not a standard pay across the state for substitute teachers? I was looking at the rate from Sahuarita, which was $95, to Tucson, which was $140. And the shortage, why would I want to go to Sahuarita if I can go to Tucson to substitute? It makes no sense.
Arizona is a local control state. And so there are very few standards set at the state level around teacher pay, administrator pay, benefits, anything. We have certification standards. So once I'm certified to teach in social studies at the high school level, I'm certified to teach in any school in the state at the high school level social studies. I'm not certified to teach math, but I'm certified to teach social studies. But yeah, substitute pay is typically what the district has left over in their budget. I mean, it's a budget line item, and they have to imagine the number of days they're going to need, and they have to make it an attractive position. And yeah, if I was, you've got two communities that are right next to each other and almost a 40% increase in pay, I would guarantee it's easier to have substitute teachers in Tucson than Sunnyside. But you could pay people $200 to substitute, and you would still have a shortage right now, because many of our substitutes are retired individuals. A lot of them are retired educators that just love the school setting, and they want to go back, and they understood they had to take a day off, right? They had to take a kid to the doctor, or they had to do something that was important in their personal life, and somebody stepped in for them, and they're willing to do it again. But when the governor ties hands on a district that might say, you know what, for 2 weeks, we've got to full on wear masks, we got to bring the hand washing stations out. We're going to battle this thing, and we're going to suppress it for 2 weeks, and then we're going to see where we are. And you can do that now because we won our lawsuit, and so we struck that law saying that they couldn't have a prohibition on mask mandates, but we still don't have all of our districts that are willing to do it. So there's nothing standardized in the state around education outside of certification.
Speaking of governor, Ducey has, speaking of bad, we won't go there. Ducey misused the COVID relief funds for unmasking students, which last report was $163 million. How is that going to affect our school and school budgets?
Well, when you're in a crisis, here's the thing we all have to remember. Due to the hard work by everybody in this room, we have President Joe Biden, and we have never had a more union-friendly president in our life. We have an NEA member in the White House as well. His wife, Jill, is a community college teacher, English teacher, and she's an NEA member. And we have, as the National Association, we have a pretty direct line of at least raising the issue, right? We're not going to get everything that we want. But one of the things that we did pretty quickly, and our Congress people did too, was they pointed to exactly what you said. The governor was spending money in a way that was not intended to be spent. And so the Treasury Department just slapped their hand. The Secretary of Education called them out on it already, and the president has as well. So the dollars are coming fast in a crisis because we have a Democratic president, a Democratic Congress that wants to get relief to people, again, to provide stability. Let's stabilize these markets. Let's get everybody to where they can keep their house, they can stay in their apartment, they can keep their job, they can feel safe. Let's do what we can to stabilize the situation, and then we'll grow out of it. So when the governor tried to misspend this money, he still has the money, and he'll have an opportunity to misspend it again. He just can't. It looks like he's not going to be able to misspend it in this way. Our issue, I think, the only thing that works with this governor that I've seen is when national headlines look bad for Arizona. That's the only time I've ever seen him blink. Otherwise, he's pretty stiff, pretty much a stiff arm type of politician. He just keeps driving you back until he gets what he wants. But this one's blown up on him a little bit because he's got no ground to stand on. The people that are giving him the money, the federal government that's made this even possible, is saying you can't spend it in a way to make kids less safe. The whole point was to reopen our schools safely.
Well, the other question I have is in regards to the Ducey, once again, $7,000 voucher program that has been paid to students that want to move from one school to another. How does this affect our public schools? I mean,
well, it's demoralizing when you have a governor and you see the very first thing he wants to spend $10 million on is helping kids leave your school, as opposed to setting a tone at the state level of, we've got to understand science. We have to understand that it's going to take a vaccine. It's going to take a change in our behaviors. It's going to take wearing masks. It's going to take being social. It's going to take all these things that science tells us to do to get through this safely. And you might be safe if you only did one or two of those, but the more you do, the more safety you have. And if he had that conversation, as opposed to, well, Arizona's going to do what they want, we trust them to make the right decision. Well, we see the impact of that. Without leadership at the top, you have all these angry activists that are showing up at our governing boards, and they're intimidating people that are willing to serve their community. And here's what we cannot have happen. We cannot have our governing boards become partisan places any more so than they already are. The councils, the city councils, the town councils, and the governing boards need to be community focused. There's always going to be an argument or a debate on how we get things done. But in the end, we have to understand we're doing this for the community. They don't care if we're Republicans or Democrats. They just want a safe, healthy community to live in. That's where the governor can be leading. And when he doesn't, it makes us feel walked on one more time. Is we know we have a governor. It's not that we can't trust him. It's that we absolutely can trust that he does not have our back.
I had a comment for you about substitute teaching very quickly. When I was in Michigan, a professional football player, retired, 6'8", 300 pounds, had no chance. He had no chance as a teacher when he was a sub. That's a tough job.
It is. It is. And and think a whole industry has been created to support teachers when they need to take a step out of their classroom. Again, because they're sick, their kids are sick, they have to do just one of those life's errands. But you can't just have your kids show up. And so this whole industry of people willing to step in with, as you say, a very important skill set, because the kids still need to learn. It's not babysitting.
I know but I do. It's good that Mike Norman is doing this. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, Mike could probably tell some pretty interesting stories himself right now.
If I can, I got to be honest. I went 2 or 3 times and I'll never go back.
Oh,
I was so intimidated and scared away. It was tough.
Well, it's understandable. And Mike, you've contributed and you're retired or semi-retired. I have to say that if you're still working a little bit. But anyway, you're calling your own shots now, which is a great place to be. But we have first-year teachers. We have 10th year teachers. We have 25th year teachers that are saying, I can't do this anymore. I'm not being supported. They're not taking anything out. The local administrators aren't taking anything off my plate. They're not letting me reprioritize to where if I've got half my class out on quarantine, and so they're learning the way we're all communicating right now online, and I've got 10 or 15 kids that are still showing up because they're not in quarantine. It's really hard to teach at the same time and keep everyone engaged. And teachers are getting worn out. And there are other states that are doing it differently, that have more support, that have lower class sizes, just simply pay people more. And some of them are talking about moving there, as they've been doing for years. And others are just saying, I'm done. I love teaching. It's not about the kids. I'm just done. And it's just like what you said. The support's not there, and it just doesn't feel like it's as safe as it could be. It's still a great job. As tough as it is and challenging as it is, if you talk to any educator, if you have an educator that's really frustrated, if this is a family member, this is someone that's important to you, ask them about their students. It's all you have to do to get them from the worst mood, the most frustrated, in almost every instance, they'll
Mhm.
start talking about why they show up every day. And it's the kids. If the kids were the hardest part, if they were the most difficult part of this job, we'd have thousands of people that wanted to do this job. The difficulty is the politics and the neglect and the idea that every educator that's taught more than a month in an Arizona school realizes is we could be doing so much better for our kids, and it really wouldn't cost that much. It really would be, the average Arizonan kicking in $30 to $50 more each a year, and we could have unbelievable schools in the state. But we don't have leadership at the top that wants to do that yet.
And we're getting closer. You kind of touched on this question. What percentage of the people are just saying, you know what, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to California, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, somewhere else. Do you have a percentage?
No, I don't. It's what I see on social media and what I hear from people that when we meet with our local association presidents and they talk about, somebody that I do know that decided that they're going to quit in December, they're retiring early. It's an accelerated rate. I think it's an accelerated rate over what we see normally. Completely understandable. The national data, I think most recently I've seen, I think Pew did a research with a study with educators, and the number, it wasn't at 50%, but normally we have about half of our first through fifth year educators that end up retiring. It's just not the right job for them. That's how difficult the job can be, is we lose about half of the people that start within the first 5 years. But now it's about nationally, regardless of how many years you've been in, it's about half of our teachers have thought about it this year. That doesn't mean they're going to do it. I don't want to cause a panic. They're not going to do it necessarily. But people that have never thought about it before are seriously considering it. Congress, Pelosi's doing her part, Schumer's doing his part, Biden's doing his part, and Kathy, our superintendent, is doing her part. We've got to get the money to our schools. We've got to make sure that we are being smart, that we're not buying new desks for our principals. And I don't know any principal that's doing that. They're taking it very seriously. But we have to be looking at long-term spending with this one-time money. That's the other thing, is the governor's going to try and gaslight everybody, and the legislature is too. The Republicans will, is they'll talk about how much money these schools have. Well, all this federal relief came in. It's like when you get birthday money, right? If everybody on your birthday all gave you money, you'd have a lot of money at once, but you're not getting that every day, right? That's not an income. It's one-time money. And we've got real needs we have to spend that on. What we have to think about is long-term, how are we going to make our schools ready for the kids who haven't even been born yet? How do we make Arizona a destination for people that want to come here, raise a family, and live in the amazing state that we love? Arizona, I don't know that it'll ever be blue. I don't know that it'll ever be what we call a blue state, but I think it can be an absolutely competitive state where good ideas can win out, and where we can really feel like, our solutions and our ideas as progressives are being heard. And as Democrats, we elect good people, we start to build the bench again, and we start getting to where we have a state that is not only beautiful, but that is on the right pathway again for stability and health.
It seems like the problem we have is the political division. And if that ever got solved, we'd have a better chance, because the other side isn't going to give us a lot of credit and a lot of help. It isn't to their advantage. That's what I think. So
I think you're right.
Question for you, Joe, for funding. Colorado has used a good percentage of the income they get from marijuana. Arizona just approved marijuana. Is that a pliable source for putting more money into our education systems for off the marijuana?
When the marijuana initiative was written, the decision was made to put it at the community college level. So the resources, not all of them, but the education resources that come out of medical marijuana go to the collegiate level. I don't know what, not medical, but commercial marijuana is what we passed. We had medical. I don't know how much taxes are coming in. I do know that it seems to be a popular product. It's about every month I see an article written about it. And I don't know what it has raised. I don't know how much California or Colorado has raised. But I appreciate the question. We need to be looking at everything. We are this is with InvestNed's, what should be $900 million of new investments coming in. That's the tax, the tax surcharge on the millionaires. With that money coming in, that's 900 million more dollars. We are still 2 billion with a B, $2 billion behind the national average.
Mm.
I mean, it's like, if you've ever seen a movie where the person's going to finish the race and it's like the race started 2 days ago, but they're going to run across the finish line, right? They're going to finish the race, even though it's taken them 2 days. That's how far behind Connecticut and Minnesota and New York we are. It's not even close. It's not like we're in a pack. We are a distant, I think we're 48. Idaho and Utah, if I remember correctly, are the only states behind us. And one of them is in significantly worse shape than we are. But we've got to be thinking big. We got to think about a moonshot. And that's what we were trying to do with InvestNed. And I remember thinking, if we get this across the finish line, and we felt very confident about it because the community supported us. I mean, we saw tremendous community support, getting it on the ballot and getting it voted on. But we knew, wow, we'd have to do that 3 times. And again, that's to be average. That's not to be first. That's to be 25th. Mm. And that's the part that I just don't think people can wrap their brains around.
So I guess, let me just say, I can see why you were the union president. You're a very impressive guy. You have a lot of good answers, got a lot of good information. What can we do? What do you see us being able to do to help you?
Well, what you're doing now is critically important. You're getting together still in this environment. You're being smart. You're bringing in speakers. There are certainly smarter people in education than I am. You're involved and engaged, and it really does matter. It really does matter. If all someone does is they fill out a ballot and they send it in, that's important. But to win elections, you've got to get out and have conversations. You've got to encourage other people to either attend your meetings or attend your actions and know, well, let me just say in a word, you got to believe. And I know that can sound so corny, but I think that with educators, we had been beaten up so much politically over the years, and we had been in such starvation wages and seeing class sizes get so high that we just didn't know what hope looked like anymore. And then West Virginia just lit up the East Coast in this beautiful moment of solidarity, to where they were fighting for their kids to have better schools, for the people that worked in those schools to have more respect, and to, again, in a largely rural state, to bring that stability everywhere. I grew up in small towns. You don't know where people are going to end up, but every community in a state is important. Every community contributes, and every community has a public school, and we've got to make sure that all of our schools look like our best schools. When we get there, then I know my work's done. I know my union work is done. But until then, let's just keep working together. Let's keep building on successes. Every time they knock us down, let's just get right back up, because we know when we're done and we look back, we will know that we were in the right fight every time. It should be about access to the ballot. It should be about access to higher education. It should be about people paying their fair share. It should be about having a community in every spot in this state that you would want to live in. That's the kind of policies we need. And it's not asking too much.
No, it's reasonable. It's very good. So, George, can you think of anything else? You did a wonderful job.
Tremendous job. I just wanted to add, and Joe's is tremendously right. When Colorado started using some of that tax they got from the marijuana, they were able to go and do maintenance on schools that had not had anything done in 100 years. Yeah. Lyman, Colorado is a prime example of that. They built a whole new high school with a brand new swimming pool, and it has changed the community. I mean, that much.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about it. If you were a kid, how exciting would that be? Yeah. I mean, I grew up in the town. The town 10 miles away had the public pool. We didn't even have a public pool. We had to go to Walters if we wanted to go swim. And it was exciting. Imagine if you were a kid, and not only were we going to get a new high school, right? and I don't know how much that excites kids, but there was going to be a swim program.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I mean by our best. Every school should look like our best school. Every kid, it shouldn't, your zip code should not determine what your opportunities are. Not in our state, not in our nation. I hope we can have some of the successes like that in Arizona, like they've had in Colorado.
I'm with you.
This is Phil. I have a double barrel question.
Okay.
I was a high school teacher. I got kicked up to being a principal, certified principal. And I'm interested in the teacher's experience. And my grandfather's Republican Party was small government, but today's party wants to control everything, including local school boards and what teachers teach in the classroom. And so, Joe, you've been addressing very important issues, but what are local school boards experiencing? And more importantly, what is the classroom teacher experiencing with all of these things like critical race theory, sex education, pandemic science, and so forth?
I think they're frustrated that so much of the work that we feel like we're experts to do, and I'll qualify that by, I'm not an expert in sex education. I taught social studies, right? And so let me be the social studies teacher. You've given me state standards, or you give me kind of a state curriculum or outcomes that I need to hit. That's good. That keeps us all on the same page. I get to add whatever else I want to it. But when we have these agitators coming into our governing boards and physically threatening board members around the decisions that they're wrestling with around, are we going to have masks? Are we going to require vaccinations for our employees, or testing? Are we going to have inclusion, or are we going to continue in our social emotional learning, professional development that we've done? Because now we have these educators that are saying that that's some wild theory that says white people are awful and everybody else is good. They're wanting to distract us. They're wanting to distract you. I'm sorry. They're wanting to distract non-educators by saying there are all these issues that there are all these social issues we need to work on. When educators are looking at a ceiling that's collapsing on them, or they're looking in a classroom of 40 freshman English students that I'm going to have to return an essay to, monthly, or a graded essay. I'm going to have to grade their essays monthly and give them quality feedback, or they're never going to be the writers I want them to be, and I know they need to be. So educators have this reality of COVID, an already underfunded system, overcrowded classroom, and a shortage of teachers, healthcare workers, and school bus drivers in particular. Those aren't the only shortages. And then we have a legislature and governor Republican legislature and a Republican governor that more or less say, no, those aren't the real issues. The issues are we're going to have masks or not. And this critical race theory, which is not, it's so blown out of proportion around what the discussions that are really happening in schools versus this idea that you're trying to name people as racist. There's nothing like that going on. Not at all. I've never seen anybody even bring proof up of something like that. But the stress that it's having on educators is you repeatedly are told you cannot be trusted. You're repeatedly told that you're not an expert. You're repeatedly told that parents know what's best for their child's education. Parents know what's best for their kids. There's no question. That's a uniform statement. But a parent doesn't know the best cancer treatment until they talk to a doctor. And then the parent makes the decision. A parent doesn't know the safest car to get until they research and look at the people that have done all the crash testing. And then a parent makes a decision. Similarly, trust educators to lay out the right course of curriculum. And then if you don't like that school, you can go to another school, or you can try to opt to another teacher, or you can, crazy as it sounds, have a conversation with the classroom teacher and say, I want to understand more about these lessons and why you're taking this approach, right? Why is it going to be thematic, or why is it going to be project based? When I learned, we all read from the same book, and the teacher lectured us, and why aren't we doing that anymore? Those are great conversations where people can actually learn. But part of the reason we have a shortage is because educators are feeling time and time again that they're attacked when they're really trying to do the job they were hired to do. And those attacks sound like a lot of the issues that you surfaced.
Great response, Joe. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a great question.
Thank you, Phil. We're sorry we missed you there. So I'm glad you stayed with it to ask the question. If there are no more questions, I want to thank everybody for attending today. Please next time, feel free to invite your friends and neighbors. Our next meeting will be live. We will be there on October the 23rd with Tony Estrada. He is the retired sheriff from Santa Cruz County, the only Hispanic and the longest serving sheriff in Arizona. He's going to be talking about border issue and law enforcement. Remember, this is live. It's in person in room 203. Please please be vaccinated before you attend. And remember, you need to have a mask, and you need to wear a mask the entire time. So please, we'll see you on the 23rd at the Continental Shopping Center.